My name is Haris Lipiridis. I'm with the World Bank. I'm part of the team that is looking after our engagements on methane, and I'm very glad for moderating this event. I would like to invite our panelists to take a seat, please. I will introduce them later. We're like 1 minute behind time. People are still coming. We're very excited of bringing this discussion into the I4C conference. I mean, it speaks to the fact that methane is an important agenda item, both, of course, for the World Bank, but also in the context of the carbon markets and how do we think about accelerating action by using market instruments. Before starting with the discussion, to introduce the participants, I would like to invite Rahul Kichlu, our practice manager at the Climate Change Group, to provide some opening remarks to set the stage, and then we'll follow up with the discussion. Please, Rahul.
Haris, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning from Berlin, and those joining online as well. A good day to everybody. I'm really delighted to join you this morning at I4C and at a very important topic discussion on methane emission reduction. We all recognize that achieving and keeping the target for 1.5 degrees alive under the Paris Agreement significantly requires scaling up efforts. And amongst the efforts that the international community is making, a very, very important agenda is to look beyond CO2 as well into other superpollutant gases, particularly on methane, which can be as much as 80 times more potent in producing warming effects on the planet in the first 20 years compared to CO2. One of the challenges, or perhaps the opportunities with methane emission reduction, is that it's concentrated, at least the human-induced methane activity, across a set of sectors, whether it's in the agro-food value chain, whether it's in the waste sanitation value chain, or in the oil and gas sector. So strong efforts on these sectoral priorities, replicating and scaling up solutions that have been proven in many other economies would be extremely, extremely useful for all of us to get behind and support. In line of that, last year at COP28, the World Bank Group announced a major scale-up in our support for methane emission reduction. We launched a blueprint for methane emission reduction at COP28, which ironed out some of the specific solutions, upstream support on analytics, technical and knowledge flow to countries and partners, as well as significant scale-up in financing from our side to support expansion of the methane emission reduction solutions. We launched 2 platforms. One is the Global Methane Reduction Platform, CH4D. Another one is the Gas Flaring and Methane Reduction Platform, GFMR. And together with the innovative solutions such as the Transformative Carbon Action Facility, we really want to find ways and mechanisms, practical solutions in sectors, in countries that can leverage the know-how that is not only constrained within a set of regions, but can be scaled meaningfully globally. We'll hear from our speakers today who have worked personally, have been involved with many of these solutions. Our colleagues in Vietnam who have looked at these solutions in the rice production system, for example, where alternative drying and wetting can not only reduce emissions, but in their case, they find that it also helps productivity, yields. Similarly, on Pakistan, on the waste management, water management systems and sanitation systems, how working with the local community in Karachi and in Punjab province can really bring out not only emission reductions, but also benefits to resilience. I think these are the type of solutions, together with monetizing carbon emission reduction potential of methane reduction programs, that can really bolster the triple wins that we talk about in terms of methane emission reduction programs. Not only on mitigation side, achieving the desired methane emission reduction targets, but also building resilience of the communities by water management, by improving the health outcomes of the communities. At the same time, helping livelihoods by improving yields, right? So I think that's the framing when you have a very successful programs that can not only support the environmental aspects, but also bring benefit through the community that is involved in these solutions. Carbon asset management exactly is something that can further enhance these solutions by making sure that the community that participates in these solutions also benefits from their activities and the support that is being provided. So I'm very glad for all of you to join and participate in this discussion. We would look forward to learning from best practices and examples and case studies from these countries, and I wish that as we go forward, that we learn and get inspiration from these solutions as we go back to our countries and sectors and try to scale up some of these solutions. So thank you very much. I wish you all a very successful discussion this morning. Haris, back to you. Thank you for the speakers for joining this morning as well.
Thank you so much, Rahul. It is really, Rahul mentioned the fact that methane is an important agenda for us at the World Bank. We have been engaging on this agenda for quite some time, but now we're putting significant effort and resources in terms of accelerating our work on this agenda. We're working with several countries. Some of them, 2 of them actually, are here. We're having client representatives from Vietnam and Pakistan, and I will start with Ms. Nguyen Huong, who is the Deputy Director General at the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in Vietnam, while Mr. Asadullah is the CEO of the Punjab Rural Municipal Services Company, both very experienced and working together with World Bank teams in terms of accelerating action on methane reductions in different sectors, one in rice and the other one on wastewater, and we'll have the opportunity to discuss more about this. I would also like to highlight that as part of our efforts when it comes to methane agenda, we're working with global partners, including the Global Methane Hub, that we're very glad to have Olivia Azadegan with us, which is a senior manager at the Global Methane Hub. Olivia has a long track record on working on the methane agenda, particularly on the oil and gas sector, but she will bring us also the experience of the coordination and the experience of the Global Methane Hub on the global agenda, the latest news on this. So I'm very, very glad to have Olivia with us. Olivia, since we did the introductions this way, let me start with you. This is an audience that some of them might not know how important and where do we stand when it comes to global emissions reductions, when it comes to methane, and how important is the agenda. Do you want to a little bit of set the stage for us, about the criticality of the agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Haris. And thank you to the World Bank and to I4C for hosting this event and having the Global Methane Hub here on this panel. So Global Methane Hub is a philanthropic organization founded as the first and only philanthropic effort to tackling methane emissions, methane mitigation, and advancing awareness on the technologies and policies for global reduction in methane emissions. So to answer your question, so why is this important? And just to build on the opening remarks of Rahul, leading climate scientists and modelers have found that reducing methane emissions is the fastest way to reduce the amount of global warming that the world will experience in the next 20 to 30 years, which is that critical time frame that we have for avoiding the potentially irreversible climate tipping points. It was already mentioned, but it has over 80 times the warming potential of carbon dioxide. It's the second largest contributor to climate change, and it's responsible for about half a degree of the current warming. Also, it's short-lived in the atmosphere, so preventing methane emissions, what we call it, it's like pulling the emergency brake on climate change. This is why the deep reductions in methane is critical to keeping our global climate goals within reach. And at the Global Methane Hub, we're working towards reducing those emissions, and our target is 35% of reduction in the next 6 years through our philanthropic efforts. So where do we stand? Well, methane emissions primarily come from 3 sectors: fossil fuels, agriculture, and waste. 60% of those come from human activities, many of which are essential to our livelihood, like producing the food we eat. Reducing methane pollution is a global challenge. That's why we call ourselves the Global Methane Hub. It cannot be solved within one nation's boundaries. We've seen some very promising policy changes and international commitments from some of the largest emitters and the highest emitting countries. So Brazil, Canada, Chile, Mexico, the United States. And we've seen major emitting nations, including the US and China, taking significant strides towards managing methane mitigation plans. We've seen commitments by them for including methane and non-CO2 pollutants in their NDCs. We've also seen recently the EU has set import standards for oil and gas sector, and once implemented, this could potentially reduce about 33% of global emissions. And then, as already mentioned, we've seen the landmark Global Methane Pledge. 150 countries, or more than now, have committed to reducing methane emissions by at least 30% from 2020 levels. But that's not where it stops. We need to see a sharpened focus on turning these pledges into action and finance. We've also seen some quite groundbreaking progress on livestock emissions. GMH announced an accelerator for 200 million funding from governments across corporate sectors, as well as governments for coordinated research into livestock emissions. So despite all of this, we've seen amazing momentum, but still only 1% of philanthropic climate funding and only 2% of overall climate financing is going towards funding methane emissions. So the reality is that we have momentum, we're seeing action, but we need to continue to catalyze that and turn those into projects, regulations and policies. And the other good news is we have many of those technologies readily available for reducing methane emissions across the sectors. So this is really a coordination challenge, a policy challenge, and a financing challenge in order to avoid that irreversible climate tipping point.
Thanks so much, Olivia, for this. I mean, for setting the stage for us. Definitely lots of work that needs to be done. Lots of work is being done, and lots of work still needs to be done. I would like now, okay, we got the global picture now. So let's turn a bit of light to the specific countries. Madam Huang, when it comes to Vietnam, I mean, where do the emissions come from? And how does this relate to the rice production initiatives and programs that we have in place? Can you please just give us an overview of this?
Yeah. For Vietnam, for Vietnamese case, the methane emission in Vietnam is like with the agriculture sector, contributes very significant in the whole total greenhouse gas emissions in Vietnam. And for rice production, so it contributes nearly 50% of methane emissions in agriculture areas, and every year it releases about 50 million tons of methane each year for rice production only. So there is many factors just effect on the methane emissions in Vietnam in agriculture in Vietnam. For example, we can see rice contribution is the biggest factors for methane emissions. Besides that, we got livestock also got a contribution in the rice in methane emissions, and also land use, water management, or even manure management in the field. So with the specific rice cultivations, my specific areas, so there are many factors, but the main thing is the main factors on the rice cultivation is just continuous flooding rice cultivation. Because of we remain the flood on the rice farm, so the methane organic bacteria can very active in this environment. So it's been encourage the methane emission from that environment. And the second one is live straws and manures on the field. So with our traditional cultivation, farmer normally they leave the straws and manures in the farm, in the field. So it also with combined with the actives of anaerobic conditions and also with the waters in the field, so it also make like a methane emits to the environment. And one of like on the specific things in Vietnamese rice culture is that we got multiple cropping season in the year. For example, we got 2 or 3 season during the year, so it keep the waters and also the manures in the farm all the time of the year. So the methane emission is really big during the years. And also we got like a very very rich organic matters soils combined with like a high humidity and also very high temperature. So it's all like combined in make the to make that the very proper environment for methane emissions in rice Vietnam. So all that factors is all related on the traditional cultivation behaviors practice of Vietnamese farmer. So currently, Vietnamese government, we are now running the program of 1 million hectares for high qualities and low carbon rice in Mekong deltas. So one of the targets of this program is just we try to reduce at least 10% of carbon emissions with rice products in Vietnam until 2030. And we to do things so we got a lot of like technical activities to reduce methane emissions in rice cultivation in Vietnam. And now we are working with World Bank TCAP to try to firstly to revise, to building, to develop the legal framework and also like institutional like for carbon market working under to implement Article 6 in Vietnam. And we also do a lot of like we try to do a lot of like a capacity building to train the farmer with a greener practice.
I would like to go back in terms of like how you work with the World Bank.
Yeah.
I think there might be interest for other client countries on the specifics of your partnership, including the capacity building. So let's just, I would say, pause here because I think this would be an interesting topic. What I get from your answer is that sometimes when it comes to reducing methane emissions, it's not always a technology issue. No? It's like really changing practices for really and working with communities. So it's a very important. I mean, this is the point that I'm really taking close. Mr. Assad Ullah, so we discussed about agricultural methane emissions. How about methane emissions from the wastewater? What is the current state of like wastewater treatment in Pakistan, and how do you bring this together, methane emissions together with your plans for advancing wastewater treatment?
Thank you so much. Before I begin explaining the wastewater treatment situation in Pakistan, I would like to thank the host of this conference to give me the opportunity to present the wastewater treatment situation in Pakistan and what are the main drivers of methane in Pakistan. So for the wastewater treatment, the story is not very promising. So we less than 10% of the wastewater treated in Pakistan, and whatever treatment takes place, that's in the urban areas. And then even in urban areas, whatever the technologies are being used, they're either outdated, they're not properly monitored. So whatever estimates we have, they are just estimates. We don't know exact how much is being treated. When it comes to the rural areas, the situation is even worse. There is no treatment mechanism. What people do is they dump their wastewater into the open drains, or either they have not properly engineered septic tanks, which the wastewater goes in there and that contaminates the groundwater. So, but this was a situation, but the government has realized that it is a serious situation, is a very good public health issue. What they've done is with the help of the development partners like the World Bank, they have started projects both in the urban areas and in the rural areas. In the urban areas in Karachi, they are installing technologies, they're building infrastructure, which would help to treat wastewater. Karachi is the biggest city in Pakistan. And in rural areas in Punjab, with the help of the World Bank, we are implementing a very big project, and it covers a huge area geographically. It covers 16 tehsils, and in those tehsils we are covering 6 million people, and then 2,000 villages. And in each village, we'll be providing a complete water supply and wastewater management solution. And on top of that, we're also providing solid waste management. Wastewater and solid waste are major contributors to methane. So with the help of this project, we'll be eliminating these emissions. So, and when we talk about other contributing factors in methane, one is the agriculture. As my colleague from Vietnam, she said, like we are also one of the biggest exporters of rice. So we use rice paddies, and they create anaerobic conditions, and they generate a lot of methane. And then obviously livestock as well, because our farmers in Pakistan, they use livestock manure as a fuel. What they do is they dump the animal waste in open fields, and then when and where required, they use that as a fuel. So in the process, it generates a lot of methane as well. And then obviously the energy sector is another contributing factor. And obviously in Pakistan, unfortunately, there has not been a proper solid waste management system. So the current practice is that the municipalities, what they do is they collect the waste, solid waste, and they dump in a field. And in the field, there are heaps of solid waste, and they're also a major contributing factor. So all these things, wastewater, energy, agriculture, and solid waste management, they are the contributing factors in methane production in Pakistan.
Thanks a lot for this answer, because I think it speaks also to the fact that the methane agenda is a development agenda. It's really touching issues related to health, well-being of the poorest people, and like also how do you live in the different settings. A quick question: is there a difference when we're thinking about wastewater between urban and rural settings, or how do we go when it comes to the solutions about this?
There is because in urban areas there's industrial waste as well.
Okay.
So current practice, industrial waste and the household waste, they all go into the rivers. So we have very polluted rivers, and also the groundwater contamination. But in rural areas, industries, there are not many industries, but there are majorly it's the household waste. Okay. And that so solutions are obviously different. In urban areas, you need high tech technologies, those technologies are expensive. But in rural areas, technology is simple. You can implement them, and they're cheap as well.
And how do you work with the World Bank? Now we're going into the round of how do we work with the World Bank? Let me start with you. I don't want to disturb the flow of the discussion. In terms of addressing these challenges that you mentioned. I mean, you got a grant from the TCAF. You're working with the TCAF. How do you work with the World Bank in terms of addressing some of these challenges?
I said we have collaborated with the World Bank to implement projects. Those projects are being financed, 80% being financed by the World Bank and 20% being financed by the government of Pakistan. As part of the financing agreement, we are implementing those huge projects. The main purpose is to streamline wastewater treatment in Pakistan and supply WHO quality drinking water to rural communities and urban communities. That's what the main task is. But where the TCAF comes in is that we wanted to, in Pakistan, the cost of electricity has been going very high. So we wanted to solarize all our schemes. And that's where the TCAF came in. They said, hey, you guys are doing a wonderful job. You want to sustain your operations. You're going for sustainable development. What we can do is being the trustee of the fund, what we can do is we can pitch your proposal to our donors. And then those donors, if they agree with the proposal, then whatever credits you generate, you'll get credit for that. You can get money out of it. So what they did our capacity building. They helped us to prepare the PIN, Program Information Note, and they got it approved from the donors. And now they're helping us with further capacity building of making sure that whatever we are committing, we fulfill those commitments by monitoring, reporting, verification, everything.
Okay. Yeah. That's a great segment to my other thing that was in my mind when it comes to MRV systems. MRV system is a critical component of any carbon market system. But how do we think about measuring, reporting, and verifying methane emissions in Vietnam rice sector in such a big scale, working with communities on the ground? What kind of systems do we have in place, and how do you think about it?
Yes, the MRV system, I think, is play a very crucial role in the every emission carbon emission system. Not only for rice system, rice cultivation, but I think it's also for others. It's also very important. As I said, our 1 million hectare program, as I said before, it's a very large scale. So a robust MRV is very, very essential for us to make the program become successful. So I think firstly a robust MRV system will help us to ensure that our emission reduction is like can be measured and monitoring accurately. So it makes our system become reliable. So with the MRV reliable MRV system, so we can like participate on the carbon credit market, and by this way we can got another like additional finance for farmers, especially with the very small household farmers in Vietnam, to encourage them to practice the green cultivation in Vietnam. And the second thing I think is the robust MRV system in rice cultivation will ensure the transparency in reporting of Vietnamese obligation with the international commitment. Just we commit with many like organizations, international organizations. So it makes more transparency for Vietnam. And because of that transparency, so it will help us to win the trust with the international partner and stakeholders. So through that, we can like comb the financial support or technical support from other organizations, especially international organizations to Vietnam. And the MRV system, we have to got a very good like a reporting system. So every single activities with the rice farm will be like a record. So we know exactly what's happened on the field. So by that way, we can got like a very updated information, so that we can give a guideline for farmer to do the farm work better. For example, they can save the fertilizer using on their farm, and also pesticides, something like this. This all things like this will help like reduce the methane emissions on the rice. On rice farm. So I think with every not only like the MRV is not only like the system of measurements or reports or validating. They also bring a lot like benefit like a finance or technical support, or even changing the mind of the farmer on the sustainable farming.
Can you give us a scale of like the project, like I mean that you are operating with a TCAF, like for how many farmers, what is the area that we're operating? I think for the others would be.
Yeah, in Vietnamese case with the program, we now estimate about 1 million like households, Vietnamese household will be involved in this project. And not only that, we got in Vietnam we try to make the small household farmer together in the like a cooperatives organization, for example, so they can get like a it would be very easier for us to negotiate with like a buyer or to selling their products. And also in 1 million household is just on the program, but now we got a lot of like a farmer outside the program. They want to join the program, so we plan just after our pilots. We plan to finish pilot this year. Yeah. So next year we will spread it into the other province, not only in the program in the origin program already. This would be.
And I understand that the World Bank is supporting you with like resources to be able to implement this project across the different scales, from capacity building to the financing to the project documents.
Yeah, with like a World Bank TCAS, they got they go with us at the very beginning step of the program. So firstly, I think TCAS pilots will contribute on legal and regulatory framework developing to help us to assessing the international carbon market, and also TCAS also help us to like design and develop and implementing the MRV system in Vietnam, so that we can like got a quality emission reduction. Okay. Yeah, and another thing, we work with TCAS in the program. It's just they help us to achieve our international commitment. To enhancing, strengthening the capacity of our farmer and also with local authorities in Vietnam, so we can they know what is like a green production. They know about carbon market. They know how to do it, and they know about benefit of like practice their farm in the new way, in the green way.
Great. Thank you so much. I would like to swiftly a little bit of like the discussion now and ask you, Olivia, a little bit to reflect on this in terms of like the role of the global philanthropy. You mentioned the Global Methane Hub works with like as a hub for like managing philanthropic funds. How do we have to think about philanthropy getting engaged in the methane agenda within the context of like supporting innovative transactions like the ones that we have discussed here with Vietnam and Pakistan? If you can also share some of the experiences of the Global Methane Hub, would be, I think, interesting for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of what needs to happen has been touched on, but I'll attempt to summarize how this works in practice. So in order to bend the methane curve and in order to begin to move in this direction, we need global collaboration across governments, we need data, we need financing, we need policies. So the role of philanthropy in kickstarting a lot of this activity starts from that capacity building. So how do we raise awareness with governments? How do we get this on the agenda? How do we educate both at a government level, civil society and the industries? So philanthropy can begin to help with that capacity building, and especially in countries where this isn't already on the agenda. So that's number one. Then there's the financing. So how do we identify financing sources and plug those financing gaps? How can we pool funds together and get different philanthropic, public and private financing together in order to deliver on these solutions? Understanding some of those obstacles is another area that philanthropy can help with. So understanding some of these barriers such as technological uncertainties, data is a massive one, and that's an area where GMH has been tirelessly working, funding satellite data for monitoring. It's all very well if countries or companies are reporting their emissions, but if we're funding these satellite data, then we have the data to be able to go and say to governments and to industries, this is the problem, this is the scale of the problem, and then begin to build that capacity to overcome. And that also ties into the accountability piece. So ensuring that funding can support that mitigation and quantifying that problem, and then also ensuring that we can have those efforts to drive the change that we need. And then in terms of GMH's funding support, we've mobilized 2 million in less than 3 years. We've aided over 50 countries in first establishing those methane targets and then advancing those efforts to combat the emissions. And then also supporting countries, including those major emitters, on setting those standards and managing those outputs. And then finally, there's the policy and advocacy piece. So we've assisted in drafting and approving EU's methane import standards. And then we collaborate with organizations to expand these standards and also try to pressure producers to also reduce their emissions.
Great, that's really useful to know. Also, because we discussed about wastewater rise, how about energy? I know that you have a background on energy. What is the role of, where does energy fit into this kind of like puzzle of action when it comes to reducing methane emissions?
Yeah, absolutely. So a core element of our work is methane within the energy sector. And many of these actors are in quite powerful positions to be able to reduce these emissions. So oil and gas methane emissions predominantly come from North Africa, Central Asia, Russia, US, China. And we've seen quite historic announcements and momentum around that. So starting with the Global Methane Pledge at the UK COP in Glasgow, and then catalyzing on that activity in Dubai, where we saw historic commitments from the energy sector around oil and gas decarbonization. So we saw around 40% of oil producers signing up to the Global Methane Pledge to abate Scope 1 and 2 emissions. We saw more countries join onto the pledge, 155 governments now. But I think what's critical to remember is 75% of oil and gas methane comes from NOCs, and most of the world's oil and gas production and consumption is outside of the OECD countries. And that consumption is only going to grow in the future, which means that we'll see more methane associated with that if we're not managing these emissions and putting in place those policies. So these countries are going to need realistic path forward to change their systems, and as they grow economically, make sure that their emissions are embedded into that conversation. So what we, as the Global Methane Hub, can begin to do in there is this knowledge sharing, funding that capacity building, technical assistance, financing, and continue to push for this transparency on data and reporting. We had the OGMP 2.0, which is the gold standard for company-level methane emissions reporting. So with our work, as we continue to build a network of scientists, policymakers, thought leaders, activists, and also the industry, all pulling in the same direction, that as we see more energy in these developing countries and holding those NOCs accountable, so we can connect them all and provide that strategic thinking and that pathway to ensure that we're keeping our eye on the methane emissions.
Thank you so much for this. Yeah, it's totally different ball game when it comes to working with smallholder farmers in Vietnam, and totally when we're talking about national oil companies. But I will leave this to, it's a different discussion. I would like to pause here to check if there are any questions in the audience. Okay, I see a couple of them. I don't know if there is a mic that we can use to, the lady in the front, yeah, please. Okay.
So basically, the project spans 220,000 hectares with a pilot of 20,000 hectares. Now, we've been working on this for 2 years. We have not reached out to any World Bank, etc., until about a month ago. Okay. Because at the end of the day, we wanted to understand that this was even feasible. Now, the complexity of dealing with rice emissions and dealing with smallholder farmers, if you try to reinvent this infrastructure of the Department of Agriculture, it's impossible. Basically, first and foremost, a farmer has enormous mistrust in if you turn around and say you're going to reduce water. Because AWD, basically, methane emissions is all about controlling the tap. Now, in Sri Lanka, we have irrigated rice fields. And the one and only party that actually controls that tap is the irrigation department. So they switch on and off the tap. So we've had consultations with all these farmers on multiple occasions in the last 2 years. And the first step is you need to create trust that the farmer is not going to get panicked, that he's not going to have water, and so therefore, so forgive me for saying this, but if you haven't had an infrastructure like the Department of Agriculture, a Department of Irrigation in Sri Lanka, you're not going to get very far. Because no farmer is going to tolerate the fact that their rice yields are going to collapse. So that's the first step. Secondly, in terms of the actual methane MRV systems, we are working with Mantle Labs, who are advising Gold Standard and advising Vera. And even that is very complicated. It requires every farmer, just so that you're very clear on what the mechanism is. You have to stick a pipe into every field, and then the farmer has to gather the data. And the data has to be fed to, there is an entity called MBRO in Sri Lanka, it's another government institution, and they have to basically have it's like a plastic cubicle that you put on the ground, and you compare your baseline data of that methane compared to what happens in a normal field. And that has to be collected in a balloon, and it has to be sent to MRV for collection, for the reporting. So let me tell you, rice methane, it is really a tough business, But I'm happy to say that we've got ourselves to a position where we can do this. We approached Gevorg, who is now the new CEO, and we're trying to talk to John Kaser, but honestly speaking, I will give you some advice. I am a private sector person. I don't like to have years and years of meetings with nothing happening. We would like to collaborate with the World Bank. We would like to showcase how you can do this in a realistic fashion and have private sector engagement. I have a Japanese trading house willing to actually co-finance
I think we can
this
take this
project.
discussion on the side when it comes to the collaboration
But I'm
aspect.
just
I
trying
think I
to
would
say
like to
to
focus
you,
now on the
it is
technical.
next to impossible listening to this lady to understand how she's going to text, how she's going to actually collect the data. I'm finding it really hard to imagine. So
That's why we brought these panelists in order to really share the experiences, I mean, from both sides. And it's really great to have this discussion from the developer side, but we'd like to understand like how the government official thinks about it. Any other question? Because I think we can bundle them together and then we can assign them. Please, here on the back, gentlemen.
Yeah, I think maybe to broaden beyond just the specific methane reduction modalities that the panelists have discussed today, what I'm really interested in, because with something like rice cultivation where you could actually get higher yields from some dryland practices, or at least reduce the inputs to the farmers, or something like wastewater treatment where there's a potential to capture that, or like the manure management that you spoke about, there is a potential to actually have a positive impact, create energy out of that. My question is more about where there's not such an obvious incentive, where there's not just barriers to overcome the investment, but where methane reduction is actually going to require some sort of trade-offs. If that is lower rice yields, if that is, cattle farmers who have to pay more money to capture or to treat the methane, or to do some sort of interventions in what they feed their cattle, whether that's something to do with fugitive emissions from oil and gas. So I'm curious to hear from the panel about how you see the best path to overcoming those obstacles, and what sort of lessons also from your countries could be applied to the whole world, and to jurisdictions where we don't necessarily think of doing this very basic work to bring standards up, but rather that we already have entrenched systems that might not necessarily embrace this sort of methane reductions.
Great. Let's pause now. We have like a quick round of response, and then we can come back to you. So it's about challenges. This one, the kind of like common denominator is about challenges, particularly on the rice sector. So, Madam Hong, you can really respond to the experience that was shared by when it comes to Langa, and then I would like to invite you some quick response when it comes to the broader challenge that you see.
Yeah. So thank you for your question. Actually, it's with the with the methane reduction activities. So irrigation infrastructure is play the most important roles, because manage the water, the irrigation is the most important factors in methane emissions. However, in Vietnam we do got a package of technicals with the irrigations, and also with reduce the seed, the use of seed, the amount of seed using in the farm, and also other practice bring the straw and manures out of the field. So back with the irrigations, so we got quite a good a system, irrigation system in Vietnam. We got an investment in quite a long time, and now to implement our 1 million hectares, we still keep investment on irrigation infrastructure system. I don't think the private sector can doing things that alone. So it's all together, public and private sectors we do together. For example, with a public with government, we invest in the big system, and with the things in the farm, so the private sectors can do themselves. So we do all together, not private sectors or public sectors. Yeah. Yeah, and about MRV measurement of like the water level or metal reduction emissions in the field. So now we are now apply a couple of we are using couple of methods. For example, we do it like writing, just noting which how many hours the water is like. The dry fuel in a day or something, just writing up in the papers, like in the I4C level 2, you know it. And we also apply in some model, we apply the like a sense, we use sensor like automatic recording the water level and the methane emissions by using the sensor in the field. We also do some we also some like use the tool from we are working with ERI also, so we use some tool to try to apply the like I4C level 3s for some other model. So as I said, this are the first years, and at the end of this year we will got reviews. So we will see which method is like appropriate to Vietnam to apply in. So I think with Sri Lanka situation, I think you should also like apply separate, several methods of measuring, and then finding which is suitable for you. And in Vietnam, we got an advantage is that we got people working like a community extension person. So they will have the farmer, they will guide the farmer how to record, how to find the difference, how to find things and apply the technicals on the field. And at this time, our community extension person, they do it for farmer at this time.
We only have 3 minutes and a half. So I would like to take the questions and then we can do a final round of like 1 minute. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do a quick question. So really appreciate the 2 presentations, and I think they're best practices in rural domain. My question is for Olivia, since you work with the philanthropy and preparing countries for carbon finance, are there companies or even governments out there who are ready to upfront invest as a philanthropy or as a money that can be returned through the carbon finance in some of the best practices that the developing country have, rather than getting it post-effect after the project? So many other projects can open up if we can get a priority list from those kind of donors who are ready to upfront invest, or the private sector, whoever. Thank you.
Great. So very quickly, Olivia, the question when it comes to the Global Methane Hub, Mr. Assad, the issue when it comes to challenges in terms of like and trade-offs, but also you can also speak about the challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so Global Methane Hub does do funding of a lot of research and development. Even if we don't have the solutions, we will look into and fund research, academia, scientists to look into some of these solutions. So just on some of those challenges as well, when we take a look at the agriculture sector, some of those solutions exist, but some of them we still need to develop solutions. So we have our accelerator, which is funds, which is overseen by a scientific committee to invest in a globally coordinated research plan into what some of these technologies could be, but as well as funding the capacity to begin to get some of the solutions that already exist implemented. And then just to touch very quickly on some of those challenges that were mentioned, we also do look to fund groups that can work with the local communities and the local industries to be able to run education and to run awareness and also that technical capacity building with the companies themselves, so that you get that internal buy-in. Because a lot of this as well comes down to education, so funding those groups that either can be on the ground and trusted to work with those participants to begin to internalize and educate on why this is important.
the final word on you. We discussed about challenges, but also if you can touch about opportunities. I would like to close with kind of like an optimistic type of like note.
All right. So in wastewater treatment, any municipal services, there have been two challenges. One is to make it operationally sustainable operationally. In the history in Pakistan was like for municipal services, infrastructure was built, but it was never operated for a long term. It was usually handed over to communities, and they didn't have the funds to operate them. So to overcome this challenge, what the government has done is that they have actually established a company, which is my company, Punjab Rural Municipal Services Company, and it has a clear mandate to provide these services to these rural communities. So we overcome this challenge with this. And then the second challenge was to pay for these services. What we have done is, because usually in history has been that in Pakistan, people usually don't pay for these services because the services were not up to the mark, and then people didn't trust the service providers. So what we have done is that we have done two things. First, from the day one when we started this project, we had a very strong inbuilt community mobilization program in it. And when we went to the field, went to the rural communities, we explained the project, and we kept them involved throughout the infrastructure development process. And the good thing has been that when we have built the infrastructure and we, as a test case, we said like, okay, we want to charge a one-time fee as connection services. And I'm very happy to say that 90%, our recovery rate has been 90%. So it means that when the communities have mistrust, you just get them involved from day one. And then you explain them the whole concept, you explain them the whole development process. And once that's complete, this is what our lesson is, and people, you do pay, you actually build trust between communities and the government services. So, yeah.
With this, I would like to thank you all very much for your attendance. Feel free to engage with our panelists or with our World Bank staff, including myself, on this discussion on the sidelines. We're very excited, we're very committed about this agenda, and I would like to thank all of you for joining this discussion. More to come. Thank you.
Thank you.